Assassin's Creed has 15 main protagonists, and almost every single one of them died alone, forgotten, or betrayed. Heart attacks, home invasions, patricide, 2,400 years of immortal loneliness, and deaths that Ubisoft refuses to even confirm happened. That's why today I'm breaking down exactly what happened to every single protagonist after their game ended, starting with the assassin who lived the longest. Altair's Library. Altair lived to 92 years old and died exactly the way he wanted. And 3 centuries later, Ezio Auditore found his skeleton still sitting in the exact position he died in. After killing Al-Mualim in 1191, Altair became mentor of the Levantine Brotherhood and spent decades expanding assassin influence across the Old World. He revolutionized the Brotherhood with technology derived from the Apple of Eden, including the hidden gun and poison blade. In 1227, his rival Abbas Sophian staged a brutal coup while Altair fought Genghis Khan's forces, murdering his younger son Seth and killing his wife Maria Thorpe during the confrontation. Altair spent 20 years in exile before returning at age 82 to reclaim leadership and kill Abbas. But then Revelation shows you what happened next. On August 12, 1257, Altair walked into the library he built beneath Masyaf Fortress carrying the Apple of Eden. He was 92 years old. He recorded his final memories into codex pages, sat down in his chair facing the vault door, and activated a mechanism that sealed the library permanently. The doors locked. The entrance collapsed. Nobody could get in. Nobody could get out. Thus Altair died alone with the apple exactly as planned. Here's what makes this impossible to process. When Ezio opens that library in 1511, Altair's body is perfectly preserved, not decayed, not disturbed, still seated in the meditation position. The apple rests in his lap exactly where he placed it 254 years earlier. The library's atmosphere somehow prevented decomposition. The codex pages detail Altair's final thoughts, his regret over Maria's death, his hope that future assassins would learn from his mistakes, and his acceptance that all things must end. Ezio takes the apple, leaves Altair's body undisturbed, and seals the library again. Altair remains there, forever. This is the only protagonist's death that was completely intentional, calculated, and peaceful. Altair chose the exact moment, the exact location, and the exact circumstances. He lived longer than any other assassin in franchise history, and died on his own terms with his greatest weapon secured for future generations. But if dying peacefully at 92, after a legendary career seems like the best ending, wait until you see what happened to the assassin who survived 3 entire games only to die on a park bench, Ezio's heart attack. Ezio Auditore survived 4 decades of combat across 3 games and died from heart failure while sitting on a bench. And the worst part is, a mysterious stranger with a facial scar appeared right before it happened. After Revelations, Ezio retired to a villa in the Tuscan countryside with his wife Sofia Sartor and their 2 children Flavia and Marcello. The animated short film Assassin's Creed Embers shows his final days mentoring Chinese assassin Xiao Jun, whose brotherhood had been destroyed by the Templars. Ezio was 65 years old, living peacefully, finally free from the endless war. On November 30th, 1524, he took his family to Florence for a market trip. They sat on a bench in the Piazza della Signoria, watching the crowd, enjoying a simple afternoon together. But then a young man with a scar across his face sits down next to him. The stranger doesn't introduce himself, doesn't explain who he is or why he's there. He simply tells Ezio to get some rest, then stands and walks away into the crowd. Ezio watches him leave, confused. Sofia and Flavia return from shopping. Ezio looks at them smiling, reaches towards Sofia's hand, and dies. No struggle, no warning. Just a sudden heart attack at 3 p.m. in a public square. Here's what nobody can explain. That bench was in the exact same plaza where Giovanni Auditore and Ezio's 2 brothers were hanged in 1476. Ezio returned to the location of his family's execution for his final moment alive. The game never addresses whether this was intentional or coincidence. The mysterious scarred man is never identified in any Assassin's Creed media, novels, comics, or developer interviews. Community theories range from him being a Templar agent who poisoned Ezio, to a time-traveling sage, to a symbolic representation of death itself. Sofia's reaction in Embers is devastating. She realizes he's gone, pulls Flavia close, and sits there holding her dead husband's hand while market crowds pass by. No grand funeral, no brotherhood ceremony. Just a widow on a bench in Florence. The franchise's most beloved protagonist died the most ordinary death imaginable. Heart failure, age 65, surrounded by strangers. But if Ezio's peaceful death seems tragic, wait until you learn what happened to the protagonist, who literally sacrificed himself to save the world and then had his body harvested by Abstergo. Desmond's sacrifice. Desmond Miles died at 25 years old to save the world from a solar flare, and 12 years later, Ubisoft revealed his consciousness is still alive, trapped in an ISU computer simulation. On December 21st, 2012, at 12:07 a.m., Desmond stood in the Grand Temple beneath New York, facing an impossible choice. Juno offered him survival as a messianic figure whose teachings would corrupt humanity. Minerva showed him the alternative: activate the eye, stop the solar flare, either release Juno and die instantly. Desmond told his father, Sean and Rebecca, to run, placed his hand on the glowing sphere, and died from spontaneous burn trauma. His right arm was completely incinerated. The rest of his body remained pristine. Abstergo recovered him hours later and performed an autopsy. But then Valhalla revealed what actually happened to his consciousness. Desmond's mind didn't die. It was transported into the Gray, an ISU simulation outside normal spacetime where uploaded consciousnesses exist as data. Desmond became the Reader, a being of pure light who forgot his original identity and spent years helping the ISU calculate solutions to prevent Earth's destruction. When Layla Hassan enters the Gray in Valhalla's ending, the Reader suddenly remembers he was Desmond Miles. They reunite, as they search infinite timelines together, looking for a permanent solution. Desmond is technically alive, but can never return to physical form. Here's what makes this even darker. Abstergo didn't just autopsy Desmond's body, they harvested his DNA and created Sample 17, using his genetic material in Abstergo Entertainment's Animus products for years. Every time someone in Black Flag, Unity, or Syndicate relives historical memories, they're using Desmond's extracted DNA. His son Elijah, born in 2005 to an unnamed mother, inherited concentrated ISU genes and Sage DNA, making him one of the most genetically valuable people on Earth. He helped kill Juno in the Uprising comics, then disappeared into the Australian outback with the Koh-i-Noor diamond. The franchise spent 5 games building Desmond as the Chosen One. Indy killed him to stop the apocalypse, then revealed his sacrifice didn't even work. Juno was released. The solar flare was delayed, not stopped. His body was harvested. His consciousness was trapped in digital purgatory for over a decade before remembering his own name. Desmond saved the world and lost everything, including himself. But if Desmond's sacrifice without resolution seems cruel, wait until you see what happened to the protagonist, who spent his entire life fighting for freedom only to watch his people get sold to land speculators anyway. Connor's abandonment. Connor Kenway fought for American freedom for 6 years and returned home to find his entire village gone. And the worst part is, nobody knows if he actually died alone or if that's just Templar propaganda. After killing Charles Lee in a subdued tavern confrontation in 1783, your Connor traveled back to his Mohawk village, expecting to finally rest. The homestead was thriving. The revolution was won. The Templars were defeated. He walked through the forest to Kanata-Seton and found nothing. Empty longhouses, abandoned fields, 0 people. The newly formed United States government had sold his tribe's land to settlers to pay off war debts. Everything Connor sacrificed, every battle he fought, every ally he lost, meant absolutely nothing to his people. They were forced to relocate despite his service to the Patriots. But then the game shows you something even worse. Connor attended the British Evacuation Day celebration in New York on November 25, 1783. American flags everywhere, crowds cheering freedom. And right there in the middle of the celebration, he witnesses a slave auction. Black families being sold in chains, while white Americans celebrate liberty. Connor watches in silence, then walks away. The final shot shows him standing alone in the crowd, realizing the freedom he fought for doesn't extend to everyone. The ideals were hollow. An Abstergo document references the sad and lonely death of Rattanaketon, suggesting he died isolated and forgotten around 1804 at age 48. That's the official Templar version. Except the Reflections comics directly contradict this propaganda. Those stories show Connor married a woman from a nearby tribe in the 1780s and fathered 3 children, including daughter Ironhyote. He broke Mohawk tradition by training her as an assassin after discovering her eagle vision, making her the first known female assassin in the Colonial Brotherhood. So which version is true? Did Connor die alone and miserable, or did he find family and purpose training the next generation? Ubisoft has never confirmed either story as definitive canon. His death remains officially unverified in franchise timeline documents. The tragedy isn't just that Connor might have died alone. it's that we'll never know for certain. And the only detailed account comes from the organization he spent his life fighting. But if Connor's ambiguous ending seems frustrating, wait until you learn about the protagonist whose death is completely confirmed because his own son killed him. Haytham's execution. Haytham Kenway was raised as a Templar by the man who murdered his father, and 56 years later, his own son killed him during the siege of Fort George. Haytham never knew Edward was an assassin. After watching 5 mercenaries storm his London home on December the 3rd, 1735, 10-year-old Haytham killed his first man trying to protect his family. Edward died from a stab wound through the chest. His sister Jennifer was kidnapped and sold to Turkish slavers. Reginald Birch, the Templar Grand Master who orchestrated the entire attack, posed as a grieving family friend and mentor. He manipulated the traumatized boy into the Templar Order, trained him for decades, and turned him into the Grand Master of the colonial rite. Haytham spent his entire life serving the people who murdered his father. But then, AC3 forces you to play as him for the first 3 sequences. You experience Haytham's perspective, his charisma, his conviction, his genuine belief that Templar Order will save humanity from chaos. In 1755, he meets Mohawk woman Kanyedi Didio while searching for a precursor site and falls in love. She bears his son Connor but never tells him. Haytham continues his Templar work, systematically dismantling the colonial assassins with Shay Cormac throughout Rogue. When he finally meets his adult son in AC3, Connor has already joined the assassins. They work together briefly, they argue constantly, neither will abandon their ideology. On September 16, 1781, Connor cornered Haytham at Fort George during the siege. They fight. Haytham is 55 years old, exhausted, and knows he's going to die. His final words are devastating. Don't think I have any intention of caressing your cheek and saying I was wrong. I will not weep and wonder what might have been. Still, I'm proud of you in a way. You've shown great conviction, strength, courage. All noble qualities. I should have killed you long ago. Connor's response is simple. Goodbye, father. Then he stabs him. Years later, Connor inscribes Sakatatari Watan beneath Haytham's portrait in the homestead basement. It means I made a mistake in Mohawk. The regret never faded. Haytham Kenway lived his entire life serving the men who destroyed his family, died fighting his own son, and never learned the truth about his father's allegiance. But if Haytham dying by Connor's blade seems tragic, wait until you see what happened to the legendary pirate who survived the entire golden age of piracy only to get stabbed by common thugs in his own home. Edward's murder. Edward Kenway survived hundreds of naval battles across the Caribbean and died at 42 from hired thugs in his London parlor, and the attack happened the night before his son's 10th birthday. After Black Flag's ending, Edward retired from piracy and returned to England with Jackdaw's fortune. He married Tessa Stevenson Oakley in 1725, fathered Haytham, and rose to co-leader of the British Assassin Brotherhood. The game's final cutscene shows him at the London Theatre with his young family watching a performance, but he's distracted. Ghostly visions of Blackbeard, Mary Red, Anne Bonny, and other dead pirates appear in the empty seats around him. The camera lingers on Edward's haunted expression. He survived when they didn't, and the guilt never left. But then December 3rd, 1735 happened. Reginald Birch, Grand Master of the British Templars, orchestrated a home invasion targeting Edward's research journal documenting first civilization sites. 5 mercenaries broke into the Kenway Manor while the family slept. Edward woke to the sound of breaking glass, grabbed his sword, and killed the first attacker in the hallway. The others surrounded him in the parlor. 10-year-old Haytham heard the fighting and ran downstairs. Edward was holding off 3 men simultaneously when one of them got through his guard and drove a blade through his chest. Haytham picked up a fallen sword and killed his first man that night. Edward died on his own floor, bleeding out while his son stood over him in shock. The mercenaries ransacked the study, found the journal, and fled. Jennifer was grabbed during the chaos and sold to Turkish slavers. Tessa survived, but the trauma destroyed her. Birch arrived hours later pretending to be a concerned friend. He's beginning the manipulation that would turn Haytham into a Templar. Here's the cruelest irony. Edward Kenway, legendary pirate captain who commanded the Jackdaw through naval warfare against Spanish man-o'-wars and British frigates, who assassinated governors and Templar Grand Masters, who found the observatory and unlocked its secrets, died fighting common hired thugs. Not in a climactic showdown, not in a grand naval battle, just 5 mercenaries in his house at night. The man who conquered the Caribbean was killed in his pajamas defending his family from burglars. But if Edward's mundane death seems unfair, wait until you learn what happened to his former quartermaster who hesitated to fight the wrong person and got killed for it. Adewale's hesitation. Ido Adewale served as Edward Kenway's quartermaster for years and became a legendary assassin liberating slaves across the Caribbean. And in 1758, he hesitated to fight Haytham Kenway because he was Edward's son, and that mercy got him killed. After leaving Edward's crew, Adewale joined the Assassin Brotherhood and dedicated his life to ending slavery. The Freedom Cry DLC shows him in 1735 Port-au-Prince, liberating hundreds of enslaved people and dismantling the plantation system. Adewale is defending the fortress alongside the assassins when Shay and Haytham breach the walls. The three of them end up in close combat. Adewale recognizes Haytham immediately as Edward's son and freezes. Not out of fear, out of loyalty to his dead captain and friend. He can't bring himself to strike at Edward Kenway's child. That hesitation was fatal. And now while Adewale focused on not hurting Haytham, Shay Cormac drove a blade through his back. Adewale fell, bleeding out on the fortress stones. His final words acknowledged how far Shay had fallen from the assassin path. "You have forsaken everything we stood for." The tragedy is layered. Adewale spent decades fighting for freedom and died during a battle where the Templars were actively supporting colonial oppression. He survived the golden age of piracy, Edward's death, and 40 years of assassin work, only to be killed by a former brother who defected. And the reason he lost? He couldn't bring himself to harm the son of the man who gave him purpose. Loyalty to Edward Kenway cost Adewale his life 23 years after Edward's death. But if Adewale's death by a former ally seems cruel, then wait until you learn about that former ally whose fate remains completely unknown, because Ubisoft never confirmed what happened to him. Shay's disappearance. Shay Patrick Cormac killed more assassins than any other Templar in colonial history, and after 60 years of loyal service, his death is completely unrecorded. But then Rogue's epilogue jumps forward to 1776 Versailles. Shay is now 45 years old, walking through the Palace of Versailles during a party. He approaches Charles Dorian, an assassin carrying a mysterious box, and stabs him in the back. 8-year-old Arno Dorian watches his father die. This moment directly connects to Unity's opening sequence, making Shay responsible for orphaning the next game's protagonist. Shay's final monologue plays over the scene. "I am an older man now, and perhaps wiser. Shang, a war and a revolution have ended, and another is about to begin." That's the last confirmed sighting of Shay Patrick Cormac in any Assassin's Creed media. No death scene, no grave, no database entry confirming his fate. Developers stated he remained loyal to the Templar Order until death, but they never specified when or how that death occurred. His grandson Cudgel Cormac became a prominent assassin hunter in 19th century New York, proving Shay survived at least into the early 1800s. But no novel, comic, or game has ever addressed his final years. The cruel irony. Shay's descendant Javier Mondragon is a modern assassin. The man who dedicated his life to destroying the Brotherhood has a bloodline that eventually rejoined it. Shay Patrick Cormac is the only major protagonist whose death Ubisoft refuses to address. He could have died peacefully at 90. He could have been assassinated in revenge. We'll never know. But if Shay's complete disappearance from the record seems suspicious, wait until you learn about the protagonist he orphaned, who never discovered the truth about his father's killer. Arno's unknown fate. Arno Victor Dorian never learned Shay Cormac killed his father, and after everything he sacrificed, Ubisoft never confirmed when he died, who he married, or if he ever found peace. Arno watched his father Charles get assassinated at Versailles in 1776 when he was 8 years old. He was raised by Templar Grandmaster François de la Serre alongside his daughter Elise, falling in love with her over the years. But then Elise ignored every warning Arno gave her. Germain wielded the Sword of Eden during their fight. Arno told Elise to wait for an opening. She charged anyway. The sword exploded from Germain, channeling too much power. Elise was caught in the blast and died in Arno's arms. The only woman he ever loved, dead because she wouldn't listen. Germain died seconds later. Arno was left holding her body in the ruins, having accomplished nothing. And then the franchise never mentions him again. Zero information about what happened next. No death date, no wife, no children documented in any database, novel, or comic. The only confirmation that Arno had descendants comes from the 2016 Assassin's Creed film, where Callum Lynch is revealed as his direct ancestor. That means Arno definitely had children, but Ubisoft has never identified who the mother was or when this happened. Here's what makes this cruel. Arno lost his father at 8. Shar lost his adoptive father at 21, lost Elise at 26, and spent the rest of his unspecified lifespan completely undocumented. The franchise that obsessively catalogs every detail about Ezio's retirement refuses to tell us anything about whether Arno ever found happiness. But if Arno's blank ending seems incomplete, wait until you see what happened to the twin protagonists who had to hunt down their own corrupted apprentice 20 years after winning London. The Fry twins' torment. Jacob and Evie Fry liberated Victorian London from Templar control and were knighted by Queen Victoria. And 20 years later, Jacob's own apprentice became Jack the Ripper and tortured him for weeks. After defeating Crawford Starrick in 1868, the twins' paths diverged. Evie married Henry Green and moved to India to expand the Brotherhood there. Jacob remained in London as leader of the British assassins and the Rooks gang, training new recruits and maintaining control over the criminal underworld. By all accounts, they'd won. London was free. The Templars were scattered. The twins were celebrated as heroes. For 2 decades, everything seemed fine. But then the Jack the Ripper DLC reveals what actually happened in 1888. Jack the Ripper wasn't some random serial killer. He was one of Jacob's assassin apprentices, a troubled orphan named Jack, who Jacob had personally trained at Lambeth Asylum. Jacob saw potential in the boy and taught him everything: stealth, combat, fear tactics, brutality. Jack became mentally disturbed, twisted Jacob's lessons into a philosophy of terror, and went rogue. He murdered 5 prostitutes in Whitechapel, not for random violence, but as part of a calculated plan to usurp Jacob as Brotherhood leader by proving superior through fear. Jacob tried to stop him. Jack captured him instead. For weeks, Jacob was held prisoner in an underground chamber beneath Lambeth Asylum and systematically tortured. Jack didn't want him dead, he wanted him broken. The DLC shows Jacob chained to a chair, emaciated, brutalized, missing his left eye from Jack's interrogation. The legendary assassin who conquered London was reduced to a traumatized prisoner in his own city by someone he'd trusted. Evie returned from India when she learned Jacob disappeared. She spent the entire DLC hunting Jack's lieutenants, uncovering the conspiracy, and finally tracking Jack to the asylum. She killed him in a brutal rooftop confrontation. When she found Jacob in the underground chamber, he was barely alive. 20 years after their greatest triumph, the Fry twins' legacy was a corrupted apprentice who terrorized London and nearly destroyed them both. And here's the worst part. Ubisoft never confirmed what happened to either twin after 1888. By World War I in 1914, they were approximately 67 years old and were evacuated to the English countryside by Jacob's granddaughter Lydia Fry. No death dates, no final missions, no closure. But if the Fry twins' ambiguous ending seems frustrating, wait until you learn about the protagonist whose fate is confirmed but whose legacy was deliberately erased from history, Bayek's erasure. Bayek of Siwa co-founded the Assassin Brotherhood and was intentionally erased from its history. And the cruelest irony is, he's buried in the same tomb as Aya despite spending decades permanently separated from her. After their son Kemu was murdered by the Order of the Ancients in 49 BCE, Bayek and Aya dismantled the organization responsible and established the Hidden Ones in 47 BCE, creating the foundation that would eventually become the Assassin Brotherhood. But they both agreed they could never return to their former lives together. The grief was too great. The mission was too important. Bayek remained in Egypt to build the Brotherhood there. Aya traveled to Rome, took the name Amunet, and expanded operations across the Mediterranean. They saw each other only once more. But then the Hidden Ones DLC shows that reunion in 38 BCE. Bayek was investigating Order of the Ancients activity in Sinai when Romans captured and crucified him. He hung on the cross for hours, dying slowly in the desert heat. Aya arrived at the last possible moment, cut him down, and saved his life. They spoke briefly. Both acknowledged their love never faded, but their paths had diverged permanently. She left. That was the last time they ever saw each other alive. 9 years later, Bayek's final canonical adventure occurs in the Curse of the Pharaohs DLC, where he confronts supernatural pharaohs resurrected by a piece of Eden in 34 BCE. His death date remains completely unknown, but his mummified remains were discovered by Layla Hassan in October 2017, buried in the same tomb as Aya despite their decades-long separation. Nobody knows how this happened or who arranged it. The database entries don't explain. The games don't address it. 2 people who spent the last 40 years of their lives apart were reunited in death. Bayek faded into complete obscurity. No statues, no cenotaphs, no mentions in assassin lore beyond vague references to founders. In Valhalla, his voice appears only through a single letter to the mysterious merchant child Retta. The intentional erasure is acknowledged in-game. Bayek disappeared from history, as all assassins should. The man who created the creed, established the tenets, and built the foundation for millennia of assassins was deliberately forgotten while his wife became immortalized. Aya's legend. Aya of Alexandria became one of the 7 most legendary assassins in history and was honored with a statue in Monteriggioni's sanctuary. And despite that immortal legacy, nobody knows when or how she actually died. After separating from Bayek in 47 BCE, Aya took the name Amunet and traveled to Rome to expand the Hidden One's influence. She became embedded in Roman politics, befriended Cleopatra, and in 44 BCE assassinated Julius Caesar alongside Brutus during the Ides of March. Her hidden blade pierced his chest in the theater of Pompey while dozens of senators watched. This single act changed the course of human history and cemented her reputation as the Brotherhood's most politically significant operative. But then Assassin's Creed 2 told us she killed Cleopatra with an asp in 30 BCE. Ezio finds Amunet's statue in the sanctuary beneath Monteriggioni Villa. The plaque reads, "Amunet who killed Cleopatra with an asp." For 15 years, this was established canon. The community accepted it, and the wikis documented it. Except when Origins released in 2017, the developers retconned the entire event. The Origins comics reveal Amunet didn't kill Cleopatra. She provided Cleopatra with poison so the Egyptian queen could take her own life and avoid capture by Octavian. Amunet enabled the suicide but didn't perform an execution. Here's what makes this contradiction worse. Ezio also finds Amunet's cenotaph in Venice during AC2, a memorial tomb honoring her achievements. Except it's not her actual burial place. That tomb is in Egypt, where Layla Hassan discovered her mummified remains buried alongside Bayek in 2017. The Venice cenotaph was symbolic. The Monteriggioni statue was commemorative, but neither location contains actual details about when Amunet died, how she died, or what she did in the 40-plus years between Caesar's assassination and her burial. The database entries focus entirely on her legendary kills. Caesar in 44 BCE, enabling Cleopatra's death in 30 BCE. After that, nothing. No missions, no mentions, no final years documented anywhere in games, novels, or comics. She lived at minimum into her 50s, possibly her 60s or 70s, but Ubisoft has never confirmed specifics. The woman who shaped Roman history and became immortalized in assassin lore spent decades doing something important enough to earn a statue, yet those decades remain completely undocumented. Her legend eclipsed her actual life. But here's what's truly impossible to ignore. These aren't isolated mysteries. Every single one of these 15 protagonists connects to something bigger, something that reveals the franchise's hidden pattern about what it actually means to be an assassin. Cassandra's immortality. Cassandra lived for 2,400 years, watching everyone she ever loved die. And when she finally had the chance to pass on her immortality in 2018, she chose death immediately. Born around 458 BCE to Marine and the Isu-blooded Pythagoras, Cassandra inherited demigod abilities, making her a tainted one, with impossible strength and resilience. After dismantling the cult of Cosmos and sealing Atlantis, she watched her father die and inherited the staff of Hermes Trismegistus, granting biological immortality. She couldn't age, she couldn't die. The staff wouldn't let her. The legacy of the First Blade DLC forced her to make an impossible choice. Her infant son Elpidios was targeted by the Order of the Ancients, so she gave him to his grandfather Darius and sent them to Egypt for safety. She never saw her son again, but then she had to keep living for another 2,400 years. Cassandra spent millennia hunting dangerous Isu artifacts across the world, watching civilizations rise and collapse, witnessing humanity repeat the same mistakes endlessly. In October 2018, Cassandra finally found Layla Hassan at the gateway to Atlantis. She was wearing what Layla described as a trendy tuxedo. The staff had transformed into different shapes over the centuries to blend into each era. Cassandra delivered a warning that shattered everything. Neither assassins nor Templars could ever fully defeat the other without destroying the world. The conflict was eternal. The balance was necessary. So every victory by one side created the conditions for the other's resurgence. The franchise's longest-lived protagonist chose death the instant she was allowed to die. But if living for 24 centuries seems like the worst fate, Wait until you learn about the protagonist who was offered immortality and godlike power, and rejected it completely, only to die alone anyway. If you enjoyed this video and want to see Assassin's Creed's most powerful characters explained, click the video on screen now.